So I recently just rewatched the Phantom Bullet arc from Season 2 of Sword Art Online, which this arc seems to be the one that really divided the fan base. Some say it's mid, some say it's complete garbage, but at the same time, some people consider it to be one of the best arcs in the series, which I personally fall into the category of people that consider it to be one of the best arcs. But despite that, after giving this arc a rewatch and a deep dive analysis, I can fully understand the argument from the people saying that this arc is not good, or at least not as good as other people say. Now, there is a lot of stuff in today's video that I want to cover, things this arc does extremely well, and things it does, well, not so well. Now, the first thing I really like is Deathgun's introduction. Within the first 2 minutes of the episode, we're already introduced to our new antagonist for this arc, who goes by the name Deathgun. His appearance is mysterious, and his name is simple, yet menacing. The character gets an extremely dark entrance, where we immediately see the ruthlessness of the character, how he immediately kills Xerxes, just for the simple fact of him being a fraud. Now, I will say that when we see Kirito and Asuna for the first time in Season 2, I was kinda hoping for a few more slice-of-life moments of them spending time together. Like, they could have shown Asuna going over to Kirito's house to meet his parents, or something along those lines, because what we do get is pretty vague, and it would have been nice to have more scenes of them together before Kirito dives into GGO. Later, Kirito meets up with a man called Kikuoka, who is the leader of the task force for the Tech Bureau at the Ministry of Internal Affairs. He was the guy that was working to help remove the players that were trapped in SAO. He tells Kirito how a player in GGO had died in real life after a guy going by the name Deathgun had shot him inside of GGO, and that the guy ended up having a heart attack in real life at the exact same time he was shot inside of the game. Now, I thought this set up the arc pretty damn well. Kikuoka didn't really have anyone else he could turn to.
Who else am I gonna find? You're it! I need your help in this investigation!
And with Kirito being the most skilled player from SAO, he was the only one that he could really rely on. Now, everyone knows that the Aincrad arc of Sword Art Online has incredible visuals, but honestly, I prefer the overall setting of Gun Gale Online a lot more. It has this creepy wide open desert atmosphere filled with rundown buildings where you can literally get sniped from at any moment. The openness of the map creates constant tension, and it just feels a lot more threatening than Aincrad's enclosed floors. Now, in episode 2, we're introduced to Sinon, along with the other players she is teamed up with. Right away, this episode emphasizes how important positioning on the map is, and how crucial it is to watch your teammates' backs. Compared to Aincrad, GGO has far more open angles where enemies can attack from, which makes every decision feel riskier. Very early on, it's hinted that Sinon has past trauma.
This anxiety, this fear, this is nothing like how it felt that day.
This is also the first episode in Sword Art Online that doesn't feature Kirito or any of the main characters. It's a standalone episode focused entirely on Sinon, and I honestly really like this approach. Okay, actually, after watching it back, Kirito and the others did show up at like the end of the episode just for a couple of minutes, but still, it's pretty much Sinon's own episode. Now, because of this, we end up knowing way more about Sinon than Kirito does when he eventually meets her. That makes it way more interesting later on, because we get to watch Kirito slowly uncover the same things about her that we already know, just from his perspective instead. We also see Sinon's bravery displayed throughout the episode, and her willingness to do whatever it takes to survive, which sets up the arc perfectly, because we realize how badass the fights are gonna be. When Sinon takes off the Amusphere afterward, we see her in clear emotional distress, but without fully revealing what she's been through yet, it makes us question her reasoning for playing GGO if she's clearly in distress. Like, is she using the game to escape real life? Or is the game itself causing these feelings? It keeps us intrigued and wanting to know more about the character. Later, we see Sinon threatened by her classmates, who are forcing her to give them money. It's revealed that the girls bullying her know about her trauma, and deliberately use it against her, which causes Sinon to completely break down. Luckily, her friend Kyoji steps in and comes to her rescue. One of the reasons why I feel the Phantom Bullet arc is one of the best arcs in the show is its incredible rewatch value. Knowing that Kyoji is actually Death Gun's younger brother, who is working alongside him, completely changes how you view his character on a second watch. You start to see just how dark he truly is, as he pretends to be Sinon's friend while secretly being a murderer in disguise. They discuss the weapons and strategies of certain players in the game, and I gotta say, this intrigued me a lot. Unlike the Aincrad arc where everything is very straightforward, as in just trying to level up as much as you can and not take too much damage in a fight, Gun Gale Online is more so about using your surroundings to your advantage, getting the high ground, looking for cover, using certain guns over others in different scenarios to give yourself an advantage. Now, I know they didn't expand on it as much as they could have, but I still found it incredibly intriguing. Sinon says that if she can prove that she is the strongest and can take out all her enemies, then she will be free. At this point in the show, we've gotten quite a few hints that she's been dealing with something that has emotionally wounded her, but we're still not sure what that is though. We do get some internal dialogue where she says,
"With her in my hands, I'm sure I can crack the higher ranks."
And she's quick to correct herself when she says kill. She says that if she wins this, she can prove to herself that she's finally free. But free from what exactly? Now when Sinon gets back to her apartment later that night, her trauma is finally revealed after giving the perfect amount of build-up. Once again, I really like how we found out all of this information before Kirito does. I think it was a smart decision and it made it far more entertaining. It allows us to see how it contrasts Kirito's relationship with Sinon throughout the arc by allowing us to know the underlying thoughts of someone with severe trauma and seeing how people hide their fears to distance themselves from others. Now, one thing I don't really understand is Kirito's nurse. I don't understand the author's obsession with making every woman desire Kirito, but this is the nice thing about Sinon's character, because for once there is no flirting involved. We finally get a break from that and delve into a deeper relationship between the characters that doesn't have anything to do with romance. Now don't get me wrong, I enjoy romance in Sword Art Online, but when every single character is falling in love with Kirito, it can tend to get a little repetitive and boring to say the least. Which is funny because I put out a poll a while ago asking you guys who you'd want Kirito to end up with in a relationship if he wasn't with Asuna, and the majority of you guys said Sinon. And even though I didn't agree with that at first, because I thought Lisbeth would have been the best girl for him, but after rewatching the Phantom Bullet arc, I can say that I'm in 100% agreement that Sinon and Kirito would have been the best together. Arguably, they could have made a better couple than Kirito and Asuna. Their overall maturity and growth throughout the arc feels earned, and I wish the author would have expanded on her character a bit more. Later, we finally get to see Sinon and Kirito meet up for the first time, which Sinon thinks that Kirito is a girl, and Kirito kinda just goes along with it. Bro's just like, it's 2025, my body, my choice. And because he's like, I can't blow my cover either. Kirito being dirt broke and needing money quickly, Sinon takes him to the casino where he uses his bullet prediction skills, which I guess he somehow just has that skill for no apparent reason, and he uses that skill to win the casino game, which that's one thing I don't really understand. I thought it would have been a lot better to make Kirito not as strong as he was in Sword Art Online, considering this is a new game he's never played before. It would have been nice to give him more of a learning curve, and I can definitely see why this season gets a lot of hate. Like, Kirito being an overpowered main character was clearly a problem, but I guess the author just didn't feel like fixing the issue going into season 2. Sinon also does look kinda suspicious as well about how Kirito knows so much when it comes to fighting, because he hasn't told her that he's actually from SAO. Later, it turns out that Kirito and Sinon won't be facing off against each other until the last bracket of the preliminary rounds, which if they make it to the last bracket, then they automatically qualify for the Battle of the Bullets tournament, which I thought was a good decision because this allows Kirito to get the hang of GGO and learn about the game before him and Sinon cross paths again, and plus this makes it so Sinon can be included in the entire arc, because if Sinon had to face Kirito earlier on, then there's a good chance that she wouldn't make it to the final bracket, which would have made the arc pretty boring. And when it's finally revealed to Sinon that Kirito is actually a dude, she wants nothing to do with him anymore, which Kirito's like, yeah, I know you don't really mean that, so I'm just gonna keep following you around anyways. Now in Kirito's first actual match of GGO, this is where I did feel a little bit disappointed because I thought that maybe there was gonna be a learning curve for him, and I guess there was when he was learning to reflect bullets with his photon sword, but unfortunately that learning curve only lasted about 5 seconds. Like bro is literally doing handstand backflips while becoming Anakin Skywalker's successor. Like this is one thing that I think is so dumb about this arc. Like I get that his character data is converted over to GGO, but still I don't remember in season 1 of SAO seeing Kirito doing backflips, but maybe I'm just remembering season 1 incorrectly. Later, we finally see Kirito meet Deathgun for the first time. Now, I thought Deathgun's entrance was alright. I think that it would have been cooler to see Kirito meet Deathgun in the middle of the match rather than afterwards, but I guess they wanted Kirito to meet him first, so Kirito could realize that he's part of Laughing Coffin, making it so Kirito and Sinon are forced to confront their PTSD earlier on, which makes it more psychologically horrifying for both of them. So overall, I guess that was a pretty good decision on the author's part. Now, Deathgun isn't sure if that's actually Kirito, or if it's someone else pretending to be Kirito, because Kirito's playing on a new account, but at the same time, bro literally looks exactly like his avatar in SAO. The only difference is that he has longer hair, which I think is so dumb. Like, how can he not tell that that is Kirito?
I'll ask you again, are you the real deal?
Just like how Kirito's sister somehow didn't recognize Kirito in ALO. Like, bro, how? Also, I gotta say, when we get flashbacks of Kirito and the Knights of the Blood Oath fighting Laughing Coffin in SAO, like, why did we not get to watch that fight in the Aincrad arc? This literally would have been the best fight in the entire show, and it's such a shame that we'll never get to see the full fight. However, I am happy they added this as a flashback scene, because this gives us more backstory on Kirito's PTSD, and just how bad it really was for him. Now, after experiencing that traumatic flashback, and having Sinon come back over to see if he's okay, she sees this scared look in his eyes that reminds Sinon of her own pain and trauma. And then my boy Kirito, feeling emotionally unstable, goes full freaking beast mode, which, like, goddamn, I would have loved to see more of Kirito like this. Like, this scene was so freaking awesome. Now, when Kirito and Sinon are in the final bracket of the preliminary rounds, Sinon starts to open up, showing Kirito that this is much more deep than just a game to her, and that there's something much greater that she's dealing with emotionally. After they fight, Kirito reveals to Sinon about the pain he's been dealing with. He doesn't go super in-depth, but it's enough for Sinon to relate to and develop a deep emotional attachment to him. Unlike the other girls that we've been introduced to in SAO, that only liked Kirito for the fact of him being a strong stoic swordsman, Sinon's connection to Kirito feels a lot deeper, and it's arguably an even deeper connection than what Kirito and Asuna have. Also, one thing I noticed is that back at Kirito's home, he still has his Nerve Gear headset, which is kinda insane to me. Like, bro, why do you have that in your house? Like, is that not giving you PTSD? Like, if I were him, I would have thrown that Nerve Gear out a long time ago, not keep it like a souvenir. I remember that in season 1, Kirito transferred Yui's data to his Nerve Gear before she got deleted, so maybe that's why he's keeping it, because maybe he still needs it for that reason. But yeah, that's just one thing I wanted to point out that I thought was a little bit weird. Maybe someone can like leave a comment section, maybe I missed a part of the show, or just misinterpreted something, but yeah, I don't know. Now, even though Sinon can relate to Kirito, she's still upset with him and mad that he lied to her, and she still really wants to beat him in the tournament. Later, Kyoji tries opening up to Sinon, which Sinon pulls away again. I still don't think that Sinon was fully catching on to what Kyoji was getting at, but even still, it's clear that she doesn't carry any romantic feelings for him. and he doesn't seem to understand that. This is where I started to question Kyoji's character on my first watch of the arc. I didn't think that he had anything to do with Deathgun, but I felt this weird underlying psychotic energy that the character was giving off. Now, halfway through the arc, we get to see Kirito's breaking point, where we see Kirito in a completely vulnerable state, where he becomes overwhelmed by the negative feelings of guilt and trauma that Laughing Coffin had put him through, and how he isn't able to bottle up these emotions anymore.
I killed people. I killed them and I can't even remember who they were. Don't you get it? It's like I don't even care that they're dead. I don't deserve to find any peace.
I think this is one of the best moments in all of Sword Art Online, and also one of the best dubbed voice acting performances to this date. He explains how even though he had a choice, he still decided to kill the members of Laughing Coffin out of revenge and rage, and that he feels like a monster because he can't even remember what they looked like. This scene really delves deep into the guilt he's been feeling and shows his PTSD, trauma, and grief to their full extents. I'm sure a lot of viewers can relate in some way to the feelings of guilt and trauma Sinon and Kirito go through in this arc, and I feel like this is such a hit or miss arc, because the people who love it a lot of the time relate to a lot of the emotional pain that the characters go through. And even though the nurse is kind of flirty and perverted, she was actually the perfect character to open up to because she has a similar experience, and that is that she has to make quick decisions of who she can save, and that you have to think about the people you have saved compared to those you couldn't. She gives him insight, saying that if he didn't care, he wouldn't be suffering like this. Overall, this is one of my favorite moments in the arc, and I wish they would have expanded on it a bit more. I know I already touched on this a bit earlier, but the overall layout for the BOB is a far more entertaining battlefield compared to the concept of Aincrad, in my opinion. It's this huge 10-kilometer map in diameters that has mountains, forests, and deserts, which every 15 minutes a little satellite passes over top of the map, which reveals everyone's location. So even though the map is very large and easy to hide in, you can only stay in one location for so long, which pretty much forces you to make a move every 15 minutes, which makes the overall pacing of the game pretty exciting, and it leaves a lot of strategy to find cover and good positioning to get the drop on your enemy. It kinda reminds me of Fortnite, how the game eventually forces players to make a move and puts that deep pressure on them. Now, one thing that did kind of annoy me is how Sinon didn't make the connection that Kirito was referring to Sword Art Online. He opens up about how he was put in a position where he had to kill because of life or death circumstances, and surely Sinon and the entire world would have had to have heard about the SAO incident by now. So that's one thing I just really didn't understand, and maybe I'm missing something here and I just interpreted the scene wrong, but yeah, that was something I thought the author should have written out a bit better in my opinion. Later, Kirito finds out that there are 3 people in the BOB that Sinon doesn't recognize, so one of them has to be Deathgun, which later in the day during the BOB, Kirito runs into Sinon and is just like, oh hey babe, yeah, so there's kinda this guy with a gun that like kills people in real life when you get shot by it in the game. So, yeah, we should probably just sit back and learn before we go and try to get ourselves killed. And Sinon is like, alright, that's cool and all, but I'm still gonna try and kill you afterwards. And Kirito's just like, yeah, sounds good. Now at first, Kirito is like, yo, it's probably the guy who's jumping around like Spider-Man, who is Deathgun. That has to be it. But he gets zapped down, and Kirito's like, oh wait, never mind. Deathgun is the same guy that I saw in the cloak earlier. Duh. Now, something that is very important that needs to be addressed is that how could they not come up with a better slogan for Deathgun to say other than
Deathgun is my name, and the name of my gun.
Like, I'm sorry, but that shit was so damn lame.
Boring.
Like, I don't know what the author was thinking when he came up with that, but like, that is literally the most garbage line I have ever heard.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Now, when Deathgun finally does kill in front of Kirito and Sinon, this is one of the most terrifying deaths, just for the fact that we still have no idea how he's doing it. Like in SAO, the creator of the game explained everything, so when someone died in the game, it wasn't as big of a shock, and that's one thing that really stands out in this arc compared to the Aincrad arc, is just the overall mystery behind everything. And when Deathgun kills in front of them, he officially confirms out loud to everyone that he is Deathgun, Death Gun, which Kirito originally wasn't sure about. He knew that the guy in the cloak was a member of Laughing Coffin, but now seeing him kill a player in-game allows him to confirm that that is actually Death Gun. Another important thing that I think this arc really needed was a separate side plot for Asuna and the others. It wouldn't have needed to be something big, but just some type of little mission where they could switch between Kirito and Sinon's storyline, and Asuna and the group's storyline. I felt that the Caliber arc could have fit perfectly in the Phantom Bullet arc, but maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, Sinon and Kirito decide to work together to take down the bigger threat and save their battle against each other for afterwards. They end up coming to the conclusion that one of the players showing up on the satellite, who goes by the name Jushi X, is probably Death Gun, because the name Jushi X has some underlying meaning to do with death, but they end up being totally wrong about that. Death Gun is one step ahead of Kirito and Sinon, because when they split up to get the drop on him, Death Gun's just like, yeah, sorry bro, I actually got the Harry Potter invisibility cloak. But Kirito swoops in and saves Sinon before Death Gun can kill her, and they make it to safety. I think they could have done this part a bit better. Kirito just took out Jushi X, saw that she was a girl, and was like, yeah, no, that can't be Death Gun, then just looked over at Sinon on the ground. Like, I think they should have made it so maybe Kirito picks up on a certain clue and realizes something is off about the situation, which makes him go back to check on Sinon. I think that would have been a lot more interesting. But after making it to the hideout, this is where the dialogue peaks in the arc, and is arguably some of the best dialogue across the entire series. Kirito explains to Sinon just how much he has changed as a person. Like how before, he would have charged right at Death Gun head first, but now, since he has Asuna and Yui, he can't afford to take a risk like that, which shows just how much Kirito has grown and matured throughout the series. And that makes it so Sinon finally feels comfortable enough with Kirito to fully open up about her trauma she experienced when she was a kid, which this makes Kirito open up about his similar trauma when he had to kill people in SAO. For some reason, this is the first time he mentions to her that he is an SAO survivor. This shows how Kirito pushed his trauma deep down to try to forget about it, but seeing Death Gun has made it resurface, and now he must face Death Gun to overcome his trauma. Sinon also feels the need to face Death Gun to overcome her PTSD, and to regain control over her fears. This is where everything ties together, where both protagonists must come together and face their fears, not only to overcome their trauma and fears, but to save the lives of other players in the game. Kirito mentions that they had captured Death Gun in Sword Art Online, and that they had him imprisoned, so it made me kinda confused that the police weren't able to track down the members of Laughing Coffin in real life and arrest them. Like, I thought at least someone would have remembered their names and reported them to the police, but I guess not. Kirito and Sinon both end up learning from each other's trauma. By hearing each other's stories, it opens a path for them to see clearly. They learn that they are not supposed to forget, and that it's good that they don't forget what it means to kill, and the significance of taking a life. And by them accepting this fact is how they will find closure. Now I gotta say, how Kirito discovers the secrets behind Death Gun's killings is actually pretty well done. It's Kirito slowly putting each piece of the puzzle together, asking himself questions like, why didn't he use the Death Gun on me when I saved Sinon? And why every time before he kills, does he have to have an audience? Everything is slowly starting to come together, and when they find out that Sinon is Death Gun's next target, and that Death Gun's partner, who has been doing all the killing, is waiting in her apartment, this is the moment where the show's suspense skyrockets, and gives us that high-stakes Aincrad arc feel that a lot of fans had been wanting back so badly. They are forced to make the first move by killing one of the remaining players in the game to make sure he doesn't get killed by Death Gun, which makes Death Gun come after Kirito, revealing Death Gun's position, which Sinon and Death Gun both end up taking out each other's snipers, which leads to everything being perfectly in place for Kirito to verse Death Gun in a 1v1. I think that the overall setup is perfect here. My only wish is for the fight to be a bit longer. It just felt like after watching 12 12 episodes for this fight, it would have been nice for it to even be just 1 minute longer. Now the final battle itself is freaking awesome, and I argue that this is the overall best looking fight in the whole series. If we're not comparing it to the improved graphics in Season 3, just the overall dark setting of the battlefield with Kirito's purple photon sword just worked perfectly together. But most importantly, this fight allows Kirito and Sinon to face their fears together. It's them actively confronting and reclaiming control over their trauma, instead of being paralyzed by it. And Kirito's kill on Deathgun was insanely badass. Deathgun wasn't just a villain in this arc, he's a manifestation of unresolved trauma, and by facing him directly, they are not erasing their trauma, but challenging its power over them. Kirito carried survivor's guilt, moral injury from killing to survive, and the fear of becoming a killer again. When he fights Deathgun, he chooses to fight instead of running from his past. He accepts that what he did was real, but doesn't let it define his worth. He stops seeing himself as a monster and starts seeing himself as someone who survived and protected others. For Kirito, defeating Deathgun means integrating his past instead of rejecting it. Sinon's fear of guns stems from a childhood moment where she acted to save herself and her mother. When Sinon confronts Deathgun, she faces the same kind of threat that traumatized her. This time she acts by choice, not panic, and she proves to herself that fear doesn't equal weakness. For Sinon, the victory is about agency, realizing that she isn't powerless anymore. Their victory shows that trauma doesn't disappear when you win. Healing is about facing, understanding, and living with it. Support matters, and they couldn't do it alone. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. They don't become fixed, they become stronger, more self-aware, and less controlled by fear. One thing I also really liked about the fight scene was that Kirito thought to shoot Deathgun to cancel out his invisibility. I thought that was a great decision on the creator's end there. Now after Kirito and Sinon win the BOB, and Sinon wakes back up at her apartment, Kyoji shows up outside her apartment, calling her name, which I instantly knew something was up just from the overall change of tone in his voice.
Asada? You there? It's me, Asada.
He sounded concerned, but at the same time almost upset, but my brain still didn't draw the conclusion that he was the other Deathgun, considering how obsessed he was with Sinon. Now when Kyoji tells Sinon that he's the other Deathgun, he also reveals how he needed to be the one to kill her, because he doesn't want another man to touch her, even if it's his own brother. So much is revealed in this one scene, and even though I think Kyoji is absolutely disgusting trash, I still think he is a great villain, just due to his overall backstory, since society wasn't kind to him to begin with, and how it made him feel like there was nothing left for him in the real world. He became the perfect victim, allowing his older brother to manipulate him and turn him into a monster. Now even though Kyoji literally said that he wanted to be the one that killed her because he didn't like the thought of another man having his hands on her, he still feels this connection to Sinon because she has also killed someone, and it gives him this mentally insane, one-sided obsession with her that is just so bizarre. Like when I watched this for the first time, my mouth literally dropped to the floor because of just how absurd and far gone this guy has come. Kyoji is the classic case of neglection in adolescence, someone who was not treated well by others and had become detached from society. And this is also one of the reasons why he felt so connected to Sinon, because she had also become detached from society and had her fellow peers view her as an outcast. Sinon, absolutely helpless and in immense fear, takes everything she has learned from her and Kirito's journey together to build the courage to fight back, because she knows it has to be done. Literally, in this one episode alone, it felt like every piece of the puzzle from this arc falls perfectly into place without being forced. Kirito rushes into her apartment to save her because luckily she had told him her real-life address, but just when everything looks like it's all over, when Kirito gets stabbed with the syringe Kyoji had been using to kill people, it turns out that Kyoji Kyoji had just happened to stab the needle of the syringe into the electrode from the heart monitor that Kirito had been hooked up to in the hospital. To be honest, I thought this part was kind of ridiculous. Like, they could have made it so much better by making Sinon rush Kirito to the hospital, and once they finally got there, that's when it could have been revealed that Kirito is actually okay, and that way Sinon could have met Asuna right away as well. At least in my opinion, that would have made this scene a lot better. Later on, we're able to see Sinon face her classmates that had been bullying her, showing that she's come to terms with what she has done, and she's not gonna let fear or helplessness control her life anymore. Later, Kikuoka reveals that Kyoji and his older brother had been arrested, and that Kyoji's older brother said they did nothing wrong, because they did the exact same killings in Aincrad, and were not charged for it, which shows the even darker impact that SAO had on its victims. Not just trauma that players endured while trying to survive, but by how it altered some players' minds and brought out darker motives and god complexes. The ending of the arc is the cherry on the cake when Sinon meets the woman from the bank that was getting robbed when she was a kid, and the woman explains how if it weren't for her shooting that guy, then her little daughter would have never been born. And this moment wraps up the Phantom Bullet arc literally perfectly, ending with self-forgiveness. I know a lot of people consider this arc to be mid, but I personally really enjoy it, and I have it in my top 3 arcs of the series. It definitely has its flaws, and that's okay. No TV show is perfect, and the overall emotional impact of the arc is extremely well done. But anyways, that was the video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't, and yeah, peace.